I'm assuming they had some kind of say in the finished credit. If nobody found it to be that bad in terms of, being like a propaganda film, right? Like, I think people should have watched it first before having all this controversy, because like you said, a lot of the noise is based off of people who hadn't watched the movie.
That's right. Like, I think that people weren't even watching the trailer. Like, they were just we had the deputy prime minister of our country, Chrystia Freeland, just like going crazy and talking about this film. And I'm pretty sure she had not seen this film. I mean, there was never, and again, if there's a correction since her media interviews, at the time of she was giving media, though, she was not disclosing that she had seen this film. So as far as I'm concerned, she had not seen this film, and she is making allegations. Hey, everybody. So we have a special episode of How'd You Like That Movie? We have been granted access to the controversial documentary that got canceled at the Toronto International Film Festival, Russians at War, by documentary filmmaker Anastasia Trofimova. Before we get into this show, though, we do want to give this statement from the podcast. We will be talking about this documentary. Unfortunately, it does not exist in a vacuum politically. So this podcast believes the statement that the Russian invasion of Ukraine violates international law and is a crime of aggression under international criminal law. Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of How'd You Like That Movie? As you saw in my preamble, we're going to be talking about Russians at War, the 2024 documentary by Anastasia Trofimova. Obviously, if you've not been living under a rock, you probably are aware that it was supposed to play its North American premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival on Friday, September 13th. Those got paused and then canceled. And yeah, we're going to talk about this doc. And one of the big things we want to try and see is, was it, in fact, Russian propaganda? Scott, let's go, man.
You had one fucking job, man. You did the intro, and I was supposed to take it from there. We were supposed to swap roles.
Yeah, we don't really do that around here. But there's lots to talk about, so let's.
All right. Yeah, like, I enjoyed this film. Now to answer, like, do we have to bury the lead? Like,
no, I mean, you
say
can
what I thought.
Hey, it's our show. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, like, I don't think it is propaganda, because at no point are these soldiers, technically not even soldiers, these civilians who you find out are drafted to the war, which they kind of don't have a choice but not except being.
So I am gonna listen. I've got copious notes, so I am gonna push back a bit on some of the stuff you say in a way that I don't normally. Some of them are drafted. It is made very clear. Some of them signed up for money.
Some are volunteered. Yes.
Some are volunteers. But even those that did sign up for money, some of them at points are just like, yeah, I'm not being paid. Like they stopped paying me. So okay, keep going, Scott.
Yeah, even some that had like contracts or whatever, that they're only supposed to be there for 6 months or something like that. You find out they're like on their 8th month or 9th month, right? With no answer on when they're actually supposed to go back to their normal lives.
Yeah, the classic line is feet first. That was the only way, basically dead is the only way that Russia will let them leave the front and return to their homelands.
Now, yeah, I think this was really well done, because you do see, I guess, for us, a side that you're not really hearing in our media, I would say, right? Because you're not really getting the Russian civilians' perspective on it. And
well, there's no Russian civilians in this. There's no Russian civilians.
No, I mean,
his wife back in Moscow.
No. What I mean
is, these are active Russian. These are Russian soldiers fighting in the Russian military.
Sure, but I'm just saying,
that's a very important distinction.
Okay, but yeah, like, you see his wife, you see his daughter and stuff, and they're like, promise me you're gonna come back. Which it's the thing, but they don't really mince words. They don't really are speaking very highly of their president, of Putin. They are bashing their own media, saying it's all like that's all propaganda. Everything you see that they see on TV or in their newspapers are all lies, which we see, like, we hear it here, but actually hearing it from, I guess you could say, the horse's mouth too, gives you a whole, like, you do. And like, you can correct me on this if you want, but you do feel bad for these people. Do you
So
not?
yeah, okay. So I think this is actually great, the way that this back and forth is going. Is I think that the way you're seeing this film is actually one of the concerns that the Ukrainian community had, is that uh, the problem with this film, and I'm going to kind of jump around a bit here, is that the filmmaker allows the Russian soldiers to kind of give their perspective, but never really does a very good job of challenging them either in the field directly, which is fine. I can understand that. Okay, like, you're in a combat area, but she had the ability in post production, like, so when they would make comments about, we're there because Ukraine had to be denazified or whatever. There's a way to deal with that, right? So you have a Russian soldier that says that. When you're doing your post-production, you put up a slide that has some stats, or she could even do a voiceover, or like, there was ways to handle that. And that was one of the, like, my on my notes of things that I had issue with this film, was the fact that she tended not to push back on anything the soldiers said. And if you don't go into this film with like a I don't want to say a high level, but like some context, it's very easy to start being like, oh, well, these poor guys or whatever. And again, listen, I served in the military. Hold on.
Yeah.
I served in the military. I can definitely have empathy for soldiers that are drafted, or even ones that like sign up and stuff like that. But there still needs to be some context. You got to remember, Russia invaded Ukraine, right? So these guys can have a sad story and stuff like that. But the reality is you need to remind the audience that they are the aggressors, right? Like, this would be like taking the Wehrmacht, the German army in the Second World War, looking at their poor soldiers during the Battle of Stalingrad, being like, man, it fucking sucks. They're so hungry and cold and stuff. And it's like, then go the fuck home. Like, if the Russian and listen, I don't think this is total propaganda, and I do have some nuance here, and then I'm going to throw it back to you. But like, I think it is very key, and it is one of the problematic aspects of this documentary that a lot of people, by the way, online, when they were complaining about, would not have been aware of, because nobody had seen this thing at this time, is that the filmmaker herself does not do a good job of giving the audience the context to understand this as how it exists in the war or the invasion. It's not, it's like an invasion of the Ukraine. Anyway, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, like, I took this as a documentary, but it was something done in happenstance. I think it's just from that chance meeting on the subway where she now finds that soldier that we follow, and then she was keeping in contact with them, and then I don't think she was ever really planning on being close to the front lines or getting invited there, right?
So, kid, let's talk about that again. That is another one of my questionable aspects. So the director has, in the film and even in her media, has been like, I had no access with like the Russian military as like this, it's higher ups chain of command. This was kind of like guerrilla. Okay, how the fuck did you get to like just be embedded with these troops all the way from the rear to the front? Now, there's a couple reasons. It's A, because someone let you, or B, and this is something where I think, like, as propaganda, it's not good propaganda, because the Russian army in the Ukraine, if you were to take this as a snapshot, looks fucking useless and comical, basically. It's a bunch of old and really young men scared to fucking death, not being fed, drinking all the time. They do not look like a combat ready organization. So it's left up again to the viewer to decide, is she telling the truth or is she lying? Because I mean, it is possible that just like operational command has broken down to the point that Chuck is just like, sure, come on, come fucking hang out with us. And the other thing too, because hold on a sec, is that there's often times where, like, she directly asks a Russian soldier, basically, like, what about the fact that there's allegations of war crimes and stuff? So first off, and the director as well in media interviews has said, like, I didn't see any war crimes when I'm there. I'm just like, as I was talking to my producer right before we came in here, it's like, they're not like, they're just going to be like, so we got to go shoot some civilians. Do you want to come with us? Like, no one's going to fucking do that. So of course you're not going to see war crimes when you're an embedded reporter. The only way that you would see war crimes is if you were totally operating separately from the military organization, right? So that, and when like you ask someone like, hey, do you think your colleagues are doing sexual assault on women? What is he going to say? Oh yeah, Chuck and Charlie do it all the time. Like, some of this stuff, it's like, I don't know if she was being naive and kind of led down the garden path, or she's lying. Again, I don't think that this meets the threshold of like full on propaganda, but there's definitely some questionable aspects.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you do see some of the leaders, but again, like you said, you're just like, what the fuck, right? Like, because the one guy starts crying on the table, who's the commander, because he doesn't want to call the guy's wife that died, right?
Sure.
He's like, she'll get a letter, and just like, why do you want me to call? And they're like, you're the commander, kind of thing. But like, looking at her filmography here, she seems to do a lot of embedment in like war zones. Because the one piece she directed was Victims of ISIS, and then Her War, Women versus ISIS, like Congo, Iraqi Safe House. So it just seems like they're I don't want to say she's naive, because you'd figure after almost a decade of working.
Well, then if she's not naive, then it's intentional. Then yes. She is purposely not giving the proper context so that we can see these Russian soldiers, yes, sad and depressed. And listen, there's lots in here where, so one of my quotes that I created for myself is, so this film's about, 128 minutes long, something like that. Is there's about an 85-minute anti-war film that exists inside of here. And you could take this footage, and with the proper inserts and cards and stuff like that, you could actually make a really good anti-war film, because you could show Russian soldiers driven by patriotism and money. And like, I mean, the one soldier who says, like, the reason I'm going is because if we don't win this war, my son's going to have to go. Okay, sure. You do all that. Then by the end of it, you show them demoralized. And then throughout that film, when they make comments, if you're not going to push back on them, you throw up a slide saying, like, on this date, Russia invaded the Ukraine. On this date, this many Russians killed this many Ukrainian civilians, blah, 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 blah. And then you have an anti-war film. Then you have a film that actually talks about like what it is to be a Russian soldier. But you cannot just dispense with the fact that they are the aggressor. Like, you can't, it's like, I'm sad for you as a person, but your country shouldn't fucking be there. And on the topic, hold on a sec, on the topic of Anastasia's filmography, so just stuff that I could verify: The Road to Raqqa, Congo, My Precious, and Champions of the Spirit, those were all Russian television documentaries by RTD. Russian Today documentaries. Russian Today is a state-controlled media company that has been like banned in a lot of places as being a proponent of propaganda, or pusher of propaganda, and a creator of propaganda. So I'm not saying, so first off, I'm going to make very clear, this is not state-sponsored propaganda by Russia. This film was a co-production between Canada and France. Primarily, their money came from Canada. They got $340,000 from the Canadian Media Fund. They also got some money from Hot Docs, the Ted Rogers Fund, and the Rogers Documentary Fund. They had producer work from TVO, BC Knowledge Network, and obviously the Canadian Media Fund, and tax credits through Ontario and Canada tax credits. So one thing I just want to make very clear before it gets like kind of muddled is that when we are talking about this, is it propaganda or not? What we're saying is it or is it not in favor of the Russian position? We are definitely absolutely not stating that this is in any way, shape, or form funded by the Russian state. But her work with Russian state television, it does call in her question her objectivity, in my opinion. Okay,
Yes,
keep going.
and that's what I was gonna say. I think when you're saying like, you know, is it was she doing it intentionally? I think it is because this is access technically that she can use at any point. And like if it was you, let's put you in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're her, you're in there with them. How hard are you gonna push on everything that it that you want to make sure you actually come home,
So
right?
that's why I said, like, I get why you may not do it in the field, but like, it's sort of like when you do like the ghost cam where you're like, oh, so I'm here, and so you can do it that way where you like cut
Well,
away.
she did it at one point when she was inside. What was it? The trunk,
ABC or whatever there.
and then they're like recording the actual like high up. She was recording the high ups talking to them, and she
Mm-hmm.
was like, "I'm hiding in here because they don't know."
But so she could have just done all of that when she got back to Canada. Like she could have set up a camera and actually recorded herself. She could have done voiceover. Like I said, she didn't even have to. She could just put in slides. There was lots of ways she couldn't do that. And again, because she has done work with Russian state television or for them, whether she was doing it in, as a paid agent of the state or was just like that's a gig and she went and did it, knowing that as a Russian Canadian, remember, so she's born in Moscow, she's a Russian Canadian filmmaker, knowing her pedigree, her background, if she wanted to avoid the possible allegations of basically acting as a state agent, there was many things she could have done to do that. And for whatever reason, and again, that's what I think you're going to have to leave up to people seeing this film. And that will take me into like whether we can talk about whether you think the Toronto International Film Festival should have canceled it. But like, there was ways that she could have avoided this exact controversy, and she chose not to. So on that topic, do you think TIFF should have? Because originally they were not going to pause it, and then and again, the police said that they were not aware of any actual threats, but that doesn't mean that TIFF didn't feel threatened as its personnel and stuff. There's a lot of volunteers and stuff like that work. Do you think that the Toronto International Film Festival should have canceled showing this film?
No, I don't. Now, like in terms of how bad it could have gone, I don't know, but this film premiered somewhere else first,
Venice,
correct?
yeah, it played at Venice,
Right.
like just like a couple weeks ago, kind of thing, like maybe beginning of summer.
Right. So this wasn't like a world premiere, and there was no controversy about this film in Venice, correct?
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm sure just like every other film festival, they just manage their controversy however they manage it. Oh, and as of the recording of this, so we are actually recording this on the 15th of September. The Windsor International Film Festival is still planning on playing this film October, and they run from October 24th to November 3rd. And this film is still in the running with 9 other nominees for the best prize in Canadian film worth $25,000. So anyway, keep going, Scott. I just want to put that in there now. So yes, Venice played it. TIFF paused it and then ended up not playing it, and it is currently about to play in Windsor in about a month's time ish as it stands.
Yes. So that's the thing. If the oh my god, I'm having a brain fart.
Mm.
But if like the people who select, what are they called?
Programmers?
The programmers.
Yep.
The programmers had to watch this film.
Yep.
The programmers had to then vote on this film,
Sure.
right? To
yep.
be to see if it's going to be shown. If you're going through all that and that's like TIFF is internationally known. Like people like
it's world
that.
class. It's a world class.
Yeah, they like that accreditation, right? Like, this premiered at TIFF kind of thing. So it's not like, it's not like a ragtag group of people that are just like randomly picking this. Like,
Oh yeah. Their
if
programming, their documentary programming team is very, very capable.
so that's the thing. Like, to me, like, if it went through the whole process and they never saw anything wrong with it, and you're way more political than I am, but if all of the producers from Canada, I'm assuming they had some kind of say in the finished credit. If nobody found it to be that bad in terms of being like a propaganda film, right? Like, I think people should have watched it first before having all this controversy, because like you said, a lot of the noise is based off of people who hadn't watched the movie.
That's right. Like, I think that people weren't even watching the trailer. Like, they were just we had the deputy prime minister of our country, Chrystia Freeland, just like going crazy and talking about this film. And I'm pretty sure she had not seen this film. I mean, there was never, and again, if there's a correction since her media interviews, at the time of she was giving media, though, she was not disclosing that she had seen this film. So as far as I'm concerned, she had not seen this film, and she is making allegations. The irony of all of this that I find interesting is that, so we, as you know, we're part of the media, the film media up here. So we were aware of what was going on at TIFF. This is more to the audience in general. And I have colleagues that are actively covering TIFF. And as Scott just said, I'm fairly political. I had no knowledge of this film. And that doesn't mean, that and a bag of potatoes. But the reality is like, I would have never heard of this film. Most of you would have never heard of this film. It was the cancellation and the protests that then made this film infamous, which now I had other media people reaching out to me, asking if I knew people they could get the screen. So instead of letting this thing play at TIFF for its couple nights, getting some controversy and just dying on the vine, they created this animal, which now everybody's talking about, like New York Times, BBC, like international publications, like, and now other film festivals, like I said, like Windsor, are basically like standing up to be like, we're the champions of free, these are my words, but like, champions of free speech, and we're going to play this thing. Like, the amount of op-eds that were written in the first 48 hours after this controversy started was way more publicity than almost like any other film, I would argue, that played at TIFF this year. So you kind of, what does the Buddha say? Be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Yeah, they got it canceled, and then they got a ton of publicity.
Listen, just because you said that, I'm now going to put my conspiracy hat on. And they're like, listen, we need to make up this Ontario creates money. So we need to get people to actually watch this shit. And they're like, not shit, but we need people to actually get to watch this. So what's the best way to do it? And you're like, you tell people not to watch something, they're gonna fucking watch it.
You son of a bitch, I'm in.
And they're like, boom, controversy. There you go. This is now winning the Oscar for best documentary.
So just as a note on what Scott said. So the person that really drove this originally was one of the people is the Ukrainian Consul General Oleh Nikolenko, and he said it is irresponsible to allow the Toronto International Film Festival, one of the most reputable world film stages, to be used to whitewash the responsibility of Russian soldiers committing war crimes in the Ukraine during the ongoing Russian invasion. So Scott is joking, but like there was very serious people who were talking about this stuff. So, yeah, man, listen, in my opinion, as I said, like, I think TIFF should have shown it as well. I think it would have, sometimes these types of things benefit more from light, like have the conversation, get it out there, talk about it. And then you can say stuff like, well, why didn't the director do this? Why didn't the director do that? Why? Like, and again, now you've created this infamous film that everybody's going to be salivating over to see and talk about and put their slant on it. And like I said, I'm trying to be as objective as possible on this. Just as a film, honestly, it was okay. Like I said, there's like an 80, 85 minute good documentary buried inside of this thing. for the most part, at points I was getting kind of bored. Some of the shots like seemed to take forever. And again, I felt that sometimes she was a little bit too close, intentionally or not, to her subject matter. Which was what the interesting part about this, though, that aspect is that the editor, so she's like, obviously the director is born in Moscow and she's a Russian Canadian, but the editor, Roland Schmelk, I totally butchered his last name. He's like a very like well-known Canadian editor. He's won a Canadian Screen Award for a long time running, the documentary for the first one of the first documentaries on the Tragically Hip. He's also did Acquainted with the Night, The Ghosts in Our Machines, Meet the Future. I mean, I almost would have think that if you just gave this back to him, said, hey, make this like actually into just like a solid, irreproachable anti-war documentary, this bad boy could just like ching, 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 ching. He could actually do that for you. And almost I feel like the director maybe needs to just like go have a smoke and let this guy make a good anti-war documentary. Because again, there's some real, like, as much as I've been kind of critical of this, there is some really intense footage in here.
The drone shots?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. There's 2 drone video footages at the end. Are those Russian soldiers or Ukrainian soldiers being bombed?
It made it seem like it was Russians.
Then how do they have that footage?
Because I'm assuming they also had the drone.
Yeah, but
because you see the drone operator, right? Because it could have been him, because he said he was their eyes and ears, right? So he could have been telling them, yeah, you need to get the fuck out of there.
Oh, okay. And the reason, and for those that when any of you guys get to actually see this film, if you get to see it, what's confusing is in the first drone shot, you see a soldier on the ground, and then you see basically a bomb, like a dropped ordnance, come into camera. And so what I was wondering is, was the drone that was videotaping him dropping the ordnance? But what you're saying is one is like the Russians watching their own guys, and the other one, there's another drone there or soldiers and stuff like that from the Ukrainian side. And what we're seeing is the aftermath. If I get that correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Right. Okay. But again, it's left pretty ambiguous because technically, let's say this was like the first guy that you see, because when the thing gets dropped on him, it misses a little bit and you see him like
try to escape.
Yeah, like he's crawling, but he can't really go because of his leg, and he's trying to tell him like, I'm unarmed, I'm wounded, just please kind of thing. And then they drop like 3 more on him, right? And then the other one was like those 4 guys rushing, and then one landed right on the fucker.
And then there's a shot where some Russian tanks or armored personnel carriers, it looks like they run into a minefield and they just get fucking smoked. So again, the idea that this is in favor of the Russians as a military, I would say, like, if I was a Ukrainian, I would be like getting a copy of this thing and being like, hey, Russians, this is what you face in the Ukraine: death, poverty, destruction. You know what I mean? Like I said, the only way, in my opinion, that this can be spun as Russian propaganda is pro-Russian sentiment, in the sense of trying to kind of sanitize the fact that they are the absolute aggressor in this conflict. So, and I mean, they do, if you have a bit of context going into this, it's a much better documentary. Because, so for example, there's a scene where one of the young women is, again, and some of these units are mixed units. One of them gets proposed to, and even she's pregnant. Actually, at the end of the film, there's one that is like near the end. Sorry, there's a soldier that's pregnant and she's still in combat. As someone who served in the Canadian military, like, as soon as there's even a hint that you're pregnant, you're out of there. Like, it just shows how desperate the Russians are at this time. I almost don't call them like Soviets or whatever. But there's a scene where she's watching a 1973 Russian TV show called 17 Moments of Spring. And she goes on to talk about how she grew up watching Soviet era TV and movies, and it's heavily patriotic. So the way I look at this is, you have poor, impoverished, drafted, and brainwashed Russian soldiers that have invaded the Ukraine, and now they are fucking paying the price for it, right? Because the Russians, when you see them in this film, some of them, they can't even understand why the Ukrainians are upset. Like they can't even comprehend the fact that like the Ukrainians want their own fucking country separate from the Russians. And again, I think that some of that is important to see, but then you need it contextualized, because just leaving it like that, if you're just like a normal viewer that's at TIFF watching a documentary, you see that and you go, oh, yeah, well, I wonder why that is. What you need to say is Russia invaded Ukraine back in the day. Ukraine finally got its independence and Russia's trying to take it back. So the Ukrainians are 100% entitled to their own sovereign state. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think they like, I'm going to say this because I think we'll be beating a dead horse for a while, a little bit, and I'll just get redundant. But there is the section where they hit that that town that only had like, I don't know the name, but only had 20 people in it, and it was the old lady. And the Russian troops were dropping off supplies for them so they can survive, kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
But when she starts talking, you see what you're saying, the embedment, right? Because she must have been like in her 60s, 70s, give or take. And she was like, because she grew up in the USSR, she goes, everything I was taught was like Stalin.
Yes.
Everything I was taught, was like them and how much they're gonna like, they're better, and we got to work for them, and we got to do this. But there's now been what, a generation removed from that, maybe two by now, in which they don't have that. And that's why when you see all these
who are they? I just want to
I'm just talking about like the civilians, right? Because even one of the soldiers that you're following in this movie
Ukrainian, yes,
is Ukrainian, but he's the same way. He was like, we're brothers, we should be together, kind of thing, right?
He's like a pro-Russian Ukrainian, and this woman that you see is like, again, a pro-Russian. I'm assuming she's Ukrainian because of where they are. And she talks about how, like you said, during the Soviet time, we were all brothers and sisters together. Why is this war? Blah, 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 blah. But again, I mean, the filmmaker's not going to go find a woman who's like, yo, my fucking house got broken into by Russian soldiers, right? So
no, but that's what I'm saying, right? Like, because you're 2 generations removed. It like, she never went for that. That's my criticism of it, right? Like, she never went further in to see, like, once you get to the non-Russian occupied territory, what that generation of Ukrainians that are fighting, like, you never really have both sides for the anti-war, right?
Yeah. And like I said, we don't want to we don't want to beat a dead horse here. I think that, so my opinion, kind of my final thoughts on this film. So first off, it doesn't have a Rotten Tomato score yet because it's like so brand new. I don't really have any critic quotes from it as well. It's got a 1:28 running time. The budget's about 340,000 plus. Those are the kind of the soft numbers I can find. Like there's some tax credits and stuff in there. Again, I don't think it's not as crazy as I thought it was going to be, but it's not as good as I thought it was going to be either. Like you, I think that the best thing for this documentary and for this conversation is people need to go watch this documentary, but go in there having a general, even read some fucking Wikipedias on like what is going on, like have an understanding. So you're not just taking what the Russian soldiers are saying and letting it just wash over you. And again, I'm sure I can guarantee you there's going to be someone in our comment section talking about, but Ukraine. As far as I've already stated, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is in violation of international law, period.
I will say that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was very bad. And that is our wrap for the day. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. If you want to get a hold of us, reach us at the www.howdyoulikethatmovie.com.
So, I mean, the one thing I forgot to say is like, so what's your like overall takeaway, and like, do you recommend this documentary?
Yeah, like I thought it was good, and I also like we never really got into it, but I watched this with my wife because I did want to get her opinion on it too because of the controversy, right? Like,
well, and the fact that she's Polish, right?
Yeah, just to see like if she found it to be propaganda, and she said the same thing. She doesn't find it to be like pro Russian at all, and she literally kind of mirrored the sentiments you're saying. Like, for all intents and purposes, it looks like Russia does not have a fucking military. Like, it's just like, now that could be what the propaganda is. You make them look super fucking weak, so that way, you know, when they do roll up, you're thinking you're facing these 60, 50-year-old men, and it's all like fucking Dolph Lundgren and Universal Soldiers all fucking ready to go, right? But yeah, like it's what it is.
Production by Rod Shaver, Vader Monkey Productions.